Baz Luhrmann is here. He is a man throughout his career who has refused to accept no as an answer. The maverick director defied convention with his film Strictly Ballroom and William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, and he single-handedly rejuvenated the musical genre with his Oscar-nominated Moulin Rouge. His latest effort is bringing opera to Broadway. Baz Luhrmann's production of Puccini's La Bohème opened this past Sunday to across-the-board critical praise. Here is a look at La Bohème. I am pleased to welcome Baz Luhrmann to this table for the first time, and I hope not for the last. Welcome to the program.
It's an honor to be here, Charlie.
Thank you very much. Just for all of us, tell us why you wanted to do this, where it fits in this trilogy that now people believe has been part of your mission.
Well, La Bohème, the original production we did, it's become a bookend to this 13 years of work that we did, because I did the original production in Sydney, Australia in 1990. And here we are in 2002, and it sort of has ended what we've called the Red Curtain trilogy, or this Red Curtain period, which is these three films that are very theatrical in nature and essentially deal with love.
Right.
And, you know, it began in some way with this operatic work I did for the Australian opera La Bohème. So, you know, it's a bookend to it, because I see that this production, in a sense, is the end of this period of work that we've done. As I move now, I mean, it's fascinating that when I was rehearsing, I was in San Francisco, and the day that rehearsals finished, I turned 40, you know, and apart from the fact that I had the fabulous opera chorus sing me Happy Birthday, which is
I heard about this, yes.
Perfect staging. But I mean, you know, God is an amazing stage manager. If you think of the precision of that at the age of 40, I'm doing La Bohème, I believe, for the last time, and saying goodbye to a certain extent to that body of work that I've done in the last 13 years. So it's become a bookend, the beginning and the end of this creative period.
But why this particular opera for you?
All right, well, there were two things that were happening. We'd done it originally in 1990, and here's the history of how it came about. About 1988, I had two companies. I had a small experimental theatre company under the auspices of the State Theatre Company, and a small experimental opera company under the auspices of the National Opera Company, which is a huge opera company in Australia. I mean, I often say if you think of Sydney, you know, here's a city with very ordinary buildings, and then the Sydney Opera House. You know, our relationship to opera since Melba has been an extraordinary one, you know. Anyway, we'd done experimental works and created new works, created new operas, and the artistic director of the Australian Opera, who was quite visionary, came to me and he said, look, we have a problem. Our audience is literally dying off in the main stage, and we want you to take the chestnut of opera, La Bohème, and we want you to address it or recreate it with younger singers.
Right.
And we want you to address it as if it was being done for the first time. And we want you to use it to try and bring an audience to the opera that normally wouldn't go, and in particular a younger audience.
Right.
And you know, Charlie, the moment this was announced, the entire subscription season to the Australian Opera. Cancelled. Cancelled outright. So it was always a brilliant, it was a brilliant solution to their economic woes.
Yeah.
Anyway, the artistic director was really a very strong man, and he stood by his view. So off we went to begin our research. We're research crazy.
Right.
So 6 months, Torre del Lago, where Puccini wrote the work, Onda la Scala. We went to Paris to research La Vie de Bohème, Henri Mouget's play. We were obsessive about the golden period of Italian opera. What did it mean? What was it when Puccini first, created this work? Where he played from child to adult, from simple person to complex person. And so we came up with this notion that, or we came very quickly to confront the reality that opera was so popular, it played to all kinds of audiences, from all kinds of background, and that the play that Puccini had taken to base this work on, to make musical, was so popular, it wasn't even the film of its time, it was basically the television of its time. I mean, it was a very scurrilous, popular play about bohemians living in sin. And he'd taken it and turned it into a musical work. So every creative decision we decided to make, every idea we had, was about bringing it back to the experience that La Bohème may have been in 1896. As a result of that, all sorts of decisions came, resetting it in 1957 because we wanted to help people understand what a bohemian was. Guys in velvet trousers and large floppy hats and ZZ Top beards were a bit difficult to read for a younger audience being bohemians. So anyway, I guess the end of that story in Australia is that we returned to open the production, and actually it was a huge controversy because I can remember in 1990 the Gulf War had broken out, and there were more letters to the Sydney Morning Herald, which is our big paper, about
your production,
our outrageous treatment of La Bohème than the Gulf War. Now it worries me that the Gulf War's broken out again. And I'm doing La Bohème, so I promise it's kind of the last time.
You can do La Bohème.
I've got to finish with La Bohème.
You never for a moment considered not using Italian.
No.
Even though you recast it in 1957.
Sure. Because
which would have given you a reason to do it.
Yeah. Charlie, as I said, all the decisions were about revealing the text, trying to bring it back to the funny, immediate, accessible experience that it was for Puccini's audience when he performed it in the end of the 19th century. And having said that, if you were to take away the Italian, you are undermining an inherent musicality.
Yeah.
I mean, the bottom line is that the shape of those vowels, the use of the Italian, is a part of the musical engine. And I can say one thing: there is no intention in any way tinkering with the musical power that Puccini's work. And in fact, if anything, it's been about revealing story through that music. So people often say, who have seen the production now, gee, you've cut it. You've cut the Puccini music. And even some of my snobby opera friends who, I've grown up in opera, so I have a lot of them, say, oh, but, I enjoyed it, it was fabulous, but it went so fast, you've obviously reduced. I said, no, every note Puccini wrote is in the production. The reason it passes so quickly is, A, our focus is on emotional engagement in the story, and B, Konstantin Kitsopoulos, who is our conductor, spent a long time researching what might be referred to as the tempo of life, the tempo that Toscanini at 29 conducted the work when it first opened. And, it was about expressing young bohemian guys rollicking around. So it really moved to crack a pace.
Yeah. And
he's reinstated that. And as a result, you go down the journey of the story and you find yourself emotionally involved and she's dead. And people go, I mean, I've had a very serious kind of opera friends go, but there was a whole lot of boring stuff in the beginning of Act 3. Where did that go?
It's in there.
It was in there.
Yeah.
You were just emotionally involved in the experience.
Tell me what else went into your own head in terms of how you wanted to construct this. Because, for example, people always point out that you want attractive people. You want interesting, compelling, looking people.
Well, so did Puccini. I mean, if you read Puccini's letters, he didn't write like... it's a little bit... Look, it's a little bit... One has to be a little bit careful, because I didn't say, go out and find the most attractive singers. That did not happen. It took 2 years to find the 3 casts that sing this production. No opera singer can sing it more than 3 times a week.
Yeah.
So we needed 3
So you got
Mimis, 3
you got
Rodolphos,
three-
exactly,
right,
3 casts. And, you know, they hailed from everywhere. It took so long to find them. Firstly, they had to have the pipes. They had to be within the top, you know, 15% of young singers in the world.
Right.
They had to have some acting ability, and it varies.
Right.
And they had to really look the role. You know, La Vie de Bohème, the characters are 25 years old.
Yeah.
So that was the big notion. Now, in the search to cast it for Broadway, it took 2 years. My team saw over 2,000 singers, and as a result, we have, you know, a Mimi from Shanghai, China. We have a Mimi Katerina from Gegiev's company in St. Petersburg.
right,
we have
right.
a boy from Covent Garden. We have an young American tenor who's off to La Scala and has just come from there. So they're among some of the finest young singers in the world.
Finest young opera singers in the world. Where have you found them?
That, you know, exactly. It was about basically they had to be able to sing it. They had to have some acting ability, and chemically they had to match up with each other. So it wasn't, as it turns out. I mean, at 25. You know, if you can manifest those characters, you are attractive. You know, and if you read Puccini's letters, you know, he often would say no to someone being cast because he didn't believe that you would believe they were that character.
Why are you so obsessed by research and preparation?
Because it's the place from where, you know, I mean, I don't see myself and my creative team as, you know, we're not there. What I do is to facilitate. I'm an acolyte of story. The stories already exist. You know, I always say, you know, Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare did not write. Nor was it a John Brown poem, nor was it Greek's Pyramus and Thisbe. As we speak now, 2 households, both alike in dignity in fair Palestine, you know, have, you know, children coming back in body bags in the desert. It's happening because it's inherently a human story. Those stories exist because we do. What I like to think I'm about, and this is particularly when you're dealing with classical text, is revealing the power of a given piece in a new time and a new place. As Benjamin Britten said, you know, if a work is any good, it will be performed many times, in many different ways, in many different places. And I'm just the captain of the re-revealing team, you know. So to do that, one has to really understand, first of all, there are 2 things. One is, where did the work come from? How did it work in its context? And then how to invent, if you like, a code for our audience in this moment to rediscover the power and the value of that work. So it's just inherent in the job. I can't see how you can address a classical work and not understand the context in which it was created.
I've got to show some clips from La Bohème. Okay, the first one, just set this up if you can. This is, well, I'm not sure what we're going to see. It's, I should just mention Lisa Hopkins as Mimi and Jesus Garcia as Rodolfo. Here it is, and we'll see what it is and go from there. Roll tape. Just for benefit of people, you want, in a way, for this to take opera to new audiences, in the same way that Rent, in a manner,
do you know,
took
Charlie,
the musical to new audiences.
You know, Charlie, in a way, I want this production to bring the opera to old audiences. What I mean by that is the original audience for opera was everybody.
Everybody, yeah.
From child to adult, simple mind.
And so what happened? I mean, what happened? Did it develop a kind of atrophy? What happened?
Look, first of all, I grew up in the opera world. I mean, some of my longtime associates are from in my company who run my live division are from Covent Garden and English National Opera. So we are of the opera world, and I'm a fan. I can sit there in a sort of rarefied temple and see sometimes, occasionally, mind-blowing experiences, or even a good pageant production. You're a participant. You're a sort of club member, and that can work for you. But originally, when it began, I mean, opera was, as I said, it was like television. It was that popular. I mean, the Ricordi brothers, who were responsible for the great Italian golden period of opera, they were like MGM. I mean, they actually had, Puccini was, they were always looking for the next opera composer, and they were trained. I mean, Puccini was one of the highest trained structuralists I've ever encountered in any work. I mean, the structure of La Bohème would put many film scripts in its precision and structure to shame, and the person truly responsible for that was Puccini. I mean, he was a phenomenal storyteller in terms of structure. So what really happened with it, of course, is that in a sense, a couple of things happen. I mean, the musical language and style changes, and what tends to happen is because it's no longer the mainstream popular musical form, it becomes revered and loved, which is a wonderful thing, but it can find its way into a smaller, like Shakespeare, it can become, I mean, what's fascinating is both those forms began as the absolute pop culture. I never forget that Shakespeare was not revered when he was writing. He was bagged by most critics at the time going,
right.
I mean, the first review La Bohème ever received from La Stampa, which is the big Italian paper, was this, I paraphrase rather badly, but this meaningless piece of fluff will not last to the end of the season, let alone have any effect whatsoever on the history of musical theatre, La Stampa. And La Bohème went on to be the most performed piece of theatre in the history of recorded theatre. So, you know what I'm saying?
Much for La Stampa.
These works weren't revered high culture. And I guess my view is really simple. The definition between high culture, I was always blind to high and low culture. I was always blind to that.
You've said that, and I do too. I feel the same way about this show and about a whole mindset. I mean, I think I read somewhere and I thought, gee, this is exactly what I believe. You said you didn't say it exactly this way. I have no theology about culture.
I have no prejudice towards culture. In a sense of this, there is just that which moves through time and geography.
Right.
I mean, that which we might consider popular trash, like Shakespeare, hit by his contemporaries, was so true to expressing the human condition. It has easily moved through time and geography, and it's simply the job of the storyteller to re-release the power and the truth of that. And that's I'm just doing a small part of the job.
Making note of one thing here is that you have three separate Mimis and three separate Rodolfos, right? They rotate one every 3 days, exactly. How do they do
roughly.
It?
I mean, like as is well documented, and even people are not involved in the opera. I mean, the voice is so volatile that it's very common that and for 30 minutes before you go on, there's a shutdown and someone goes on. Now, they're
all there each night, the three of them.
No, what happens is this: as I rehearsed, I mean, we have an extremely extended rehearsal period, and we now refer to it as wife swapping, but during rehearsals I refer to it as throwing the dice, which is, although they evolve in their particular couples. At any given moment, I would throw the dice, and Jesus would end up with Katerina, and so they're extremely capable of playing opposite each other, and they find it very exciting. I mean, we've had nights in San Francisco where the couples we've had to throw the dice or wife swap. Don't get out there, Charlie. It's the wrong impression, but
I got it.
But it's been thrilling for the players because they get a little way away from the feeling of let's
it's a little bit, which I thought was brilliant, when True West. The characters exchange roles. They flip over every 3 or 4 shows.
It's thrilling for players. It's thrilling for them because they're absolutely in control of their character. The mechanism of staging is in place, and it's like playing an exciting game of tennis.
Right.
It's like you've really got to be on the ball.
Exactly. All right, let me just see one more roll tape. Here is another segment from La Bohème. There's so much I want to talk about. Let me just talk about one thing here while we're on this. The creative collaboration between you and Sia and your wife.
Yes.
How does it work?
Everyone wants to know that. We argue all the time.
Yeah.
No, actually, Charlie, in a wider sense, why I have a very personal... I mean, I envision the thing I want to make. That's a personal part. And if you go to the other end of the... And the very first person then, my very first audience, my very first collaborator, the other half, if you like, if one part of my creative soul envisaged where to go, the other half, the realization half, it's Siam. And, you know, I met Siam. She's like this too. If she was here, you'd say, well, when did you meet? When did you get married? And we can never remember those dates, because I always feel like I met her sometime. She came, I had my companies. I was looking for young designers. Her and her partner, she came on her own to a meeting with me at my office. Actually, it was my apartment. There was nothing in it. It was my apartment and office.
Now we remember these things.
Yeah, I mean,
an apartment or office?
You know, well, it was in my apartment above a brothel.
Right.
It was above a brothel in King's Cross, Australia, and there was no furniture in it. We sat out on the balcony and we had a conversation. It was like meant to be an hour's interview, and I remember maybe 4 hours later that it had gone dark. We were still talking about ideas. We went from Brecht to Madonna. You know, this is like the 80s, and the conversation went on. And I maintain that sort of. That excitement of creative dialogue, that same meeting is still taking place. We still talk like that. We still have thrill.
So then everybody would ask this: how do you maintain that freshness? Is it because you are so both passionate about this sort of work-life thing? In other words, there are no boundaries, and there are no divisions between life and work and relationship and all of that.
So you know what, Charlie? It's absolutely, it's the circus life. I mean, I to a certain extent grew up in the circus. I always maintain, because I grew up in a sort of public. It was just a shop and a gas station in the side of a road where people came and left, and you know, it was like passing ships through an island. But early on, we lived the life now that we live, and that I lived before I met CM, and that I've continued to live since I met CM. But let me say this.
So what does that mean, you lived the life?
Well, it seems, I note that other people say that seems crazy and strange. To me, it's a normal life, which is there is no definition between work and life. It's the one thing, you know, they feed each other. I don't go like 9 o'clock time to start work. I mean, tonight I go off to have a dinner with, you know, an interesting person who's going to sponsor the Young Artist Program, if you like, for our company. It's just one thing. Now,
me too.
What I'd like to point out is that this doesn't stop with CM. From that moment on, although I know what it is I want to create, the collaboration is as thorough, profound, and complete and open with every single person that moves on from there. So, for example, when I've been writing the screenplays to this particular trilogy of works, my best friend was my co-writer. Moving on from there, you know, choreographer John O'Connell, and then there's a group of people who I then tell the story to, that are my close collaborators. We collaborate. We get it down on paper, we do sketches, designs, and then we tell the group of actors. The group of actors then take it on. And so a fearless, open collaboration is to me not only thrilling, but essential to serving that which is bigger than your idea or my idea. And that is the story that rises above us all. So I'm in service to something greater than even my own, you know, my own point of view about it, which is what serves the story.
Do you think that conflict and tension and bring out a better end result?
I totally do. I actually actively seek. I mean, everyone in Baz Marks are very good at argument. I stimulate argument. It's never personal argument. It's only about the search for, you know, what I call the third idea. Not yours, not mine, but the third idea. And the pursuit of the third idea. I mean, they're never, you know, I mean, Sim and I have creative screaming matches all the time, but it's like playing tennis. I've used that metaphor twice, but I mean, it is like a game in pursuit of resolving a small step on the road to a bigger and final result.
All right. Roll tape. This is the ensemble from the beginning of Act 2, and then we'll turn to Moulin Rouge. Moulin Rouge. what did you achieve with that? I mean, what people, it is said, either loved it
or loathe it.
Or loathe it.
And it's true. That's absolutely true. Well, what I achieved, I mean, what we set out to achieve was, first of all, I had my own personal creative needs to how to enrich the life journey.
Right.
I wanted to I loved musicals as a kid. I grew up in a very isolated place. We had, Charlie, talking about television, we had one TV station. For a short time, my dad, we had a farm, we had a gas station, and the local cinema for a short time.
Right.
And whereby a red curtain used to raise up, and we had to stand up and sing, salute the Queen.
Right.
I don't know if we saluted, but we stood up, and then the magic of cinema would open up. But in our one television station, we got what was considered very cheap television, junk television of the 70s, right? Dump downs, and this would be stuff like Citizen Kane, or The Red Shoes, or Bandwagon, or Top Hat. Rubbish. You remember the early 70s, these forms were not, they weren't revered, So I grew up on that. And that my love of that kind of use of artificial cinematic language to make and identify a larger human experience was something I grew up on. So, of course I went away to study at the National Institute of Dramatic Art, and when I was, when I left the psychological naturalism or Brecht or Artaud, I was, anything basically my mother wasn't necessarily very impressed by, I thought was great art, right? It had to be, you had to feel like you were in a slightly exclusive club to feel a serious artist. One gets cured of that really quickly when you start dealing with Molière, Shakespeare, Puccini, Mozart. You realise actually their genius is that they can play to all kinds of audience from all kinds of background, and I became obsessed with that. Now, I wanted to reinvent the musical, but one recognised that while having one foot in the basic and very real constructs of the classical musical, and believe you me, even though I knew much about the musical and have written them and so on and so forth, I went back to a research process on the basic mechanisms of musical form. Having said that, one had to walk to bring in a new audience, an audience that felt they would have been, for example, ahead of the game, that they were watching a photocopy of a musical style. One had to walk the very edge of contemporary tempo. One had to be, particularly in the first 20 minutes. It's designed in the first 20 minutes to confront you, to say, are you in or are you out? Do you accept this contract or not? Can you surrender to this or not? Come or go, in or out.
If you don't, you'll never go.
And you have no point. It's pointless. And I respect that.
If you don't accept the contract, then you
forget it. And there are some people for whom they just go like, it's a bit like watching a 3D thing. They can't see the image, and they go like, what's everyone reacting to? But it is, again, it's just like we talked about in the theatre, this device of an honest manipulation. It says to everybody, it's not that you forget the person you've gone with and look at life through a keyhole. It's that you nudge the person next door and go, is this really happening? Ha, 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 ha. Okay, we get it. We've got to make a choice. We've got to actively participate. It's not passive cinema. You've got to choose to participate. And so I guess to answer your question, which I've gone roundabout on, which is normal for me, what did I achieve? We set out not to make the definitive musical for this millennium, but to simply open the door a little way so that, and brilliantly and wonderfully, Friday night I'm off to see Chicago, which I know we're all looking forward to.
Amazing.
I'm sure it's brilliant. And, what I want to know is that next year there are 2 musicals and 3 musicals, because the music storytelling form has, since the dawn of man, been one of the most powerful, since we sat around the campfire and told story with music. Right. Its power is not that it just tells story, it's that it can exalt the human condition. Mm-hmm. It's that who we are can be heightened in an experience that takes us to a place you can't get without music. And to me, to be a little part of that story is to have done something useful.
All right, let me take a look at a scene from Moulin Rouge. Here it is.
How wonderful life is. Now you're in the world.
Casting Nicole.
Yes. Well,
an obvious choice, or did you?
No. Well, to me, yes. Well, let me be honest about that. Actually, to a lot of people, and certainly when we were in the process of getting green light and all of that, it may not have been the most obvious notion. And my history with Nicole is that, I think 6 years earlier we were guest editors for Vogue Australia.
Right.
And I shot her, and And what struck me when I met her, because she's Australian, I'm Australian,
Right.
what struck me was that I sat down with this person in a restaurant in you know, the image that everyone talks about, this kind of distant, regal, but somewhat distant character. I understood why people said that, but when I sat down with her, he was this incredibly warm, funny, intelligent. I mean, you know, it was one of those lunches that went on, you know, could have gone on forever. But that might have the wrong feel about it. But you know, and I always thought when I did that, we did that work with her on Vogue. I thought one day I'd love to be involved in revealing that side of you through your work. I've always wanted to work with her. She wanted to work with me. We were looking for opportunity. Now, cut to years later, and my very good casting director who I worked with, Ronna Kress, we were going through the process of how we might cast the film. And at one point I had younger characters involved. I was developing the text with Craig Pearce. We were developing text.
Right.
And then the text, what we realised was that Satine had to be a woman who had hit her prime on every level. And that, you know, was on the one hand, the men who came to the Moulin Rouge, their iconic idea of the fantasy of the perfect woman. But on the other hand, the girl next door, incredible warmth. It very quickly, and particularly as we identified Ewan, the idea very quickly became that she would be perfect, but could she sing? And this I did not know. Now, I had gone and seen many, many actors around the world, as I do every few years. I go and workshop with them and just remind myself and work with them, you know. And she was in...
Waiting to be hit by lightning.
Well, she was in the Blue Room at the time on Broadway.
Right.
And it was really hard to get her and Ewan together, because this was the chemical equation, you know, the sort of Burton-Taylor idea, you know. And I could never get to her. Anyway, I eventually... Because I hadn't seen her for years, and I eventually went and saw the Blue Room, which was fantastic. And I sent her... her character receives roses from a guy in the theatre, in the play. So I sent her the same roses backstage and said, little card says, she sings, she dances, she dies. How can you refuse? So pretty quickly we got into a little workshop and you know, discovering the voice and realising that, you see, the thing is, in the golden period of Hollywood, it wasn't about having a big voice. I mean, I work with opera choruses and they all have big voices. It was about having a voice that could affect you emotionally, that you could tell story through. And it became clear very quickly that she had what it took to tell the story vocally, like a Marlene Dietrich, you know, like in the same way Marilyn Monroe, that Nicole has a bigger voice than that, but can be very, very emotionally available through her voice. So that was the decision. Having said that, you know yourself, Charlie, there are a lot of people going, Nicole Kidman, sing, dance, how can this, you know? And I think that what I loved about it, we both went through a very intense journey ourselves during the period of time. She is one of the she's inspiring in her ability to be so good when things are so bad and difficult. And I believe that in Moulin Rouge, it's not the only part of Nicole, because she is an actor, but that kind of warm, electric personality that is captured in that film, that wackiness, that humanity, that's a big part of her that she hasn't had the opportunity to reveal.
We've only seen the tip of the iceberg.
Correct, and that, if she comes in, you'll receive that probably in buckets, as opposed to, yes, indeed, she can be extraordinarily strong, she can be very precise, she can be regal, you know.
I have two last questions, of which could last an entire hour, but I don't have but 5 minutes. One, how do you measure the influence your father had on you?
It's out there at the moment because, look, I intend, as I've...
He was a remarkably strong guy, wasn't he? I mean, this is a guy
huge character, huge. But look, the work I'm doing at the moment, musical work, then this epic work, but as I get older, and I'm saving, most people do their sort of, I grew up in the middle of nowhere story to get into the work. I want to save that to the end and tell it in a trilogy of works. But
your story in a trilogy of works?
Yes, just, you know, there's sort of 3 works about growing up in the middle of nowhere, you know, living on an island, if you like, on a freeway. If you've seen Baghdad Cafe, you know, the ships arrive, interesting people get out of cars. I'm an invisible kid. We talked about the obsession with character. Who are they? Where did they come from? Where are they going to? What are they about? But my father, and so, Charlie, I've just begun at the age of 40 to start looking back at that in terms of character. But
it is rich in complexity.
It is rich in complexity, and I think that, you know, what's extraordinary, you know, he died on the first day of shooting of Moulin Rouge. Now, how could that be? You know, without any storytelling exaggeration, of which I am more than capable of, I am stepping up to the monitor to call action on the first shot on the first day, and my assistant director has a phone, and it's, you know, my father's died. We knew he would die within a certain time frame, but it was surprising. So the symbolism of that, the fact that I was embarking on that journey, that he died, I stopped for several weeks, first time in my life, my work, to be part of his burial, and then I came back to Moulin Rouge, and Moulin Rouge in a way resurrected me, which is what the story has to offer. But what I realised and came out of with that was day one of the sort of understanding about how we are unavoidably spend the rest of our life revealing or discovering or understanding the gifts we're left with from our parents, you know, and sometimes the negatives too. But and that's a lifelong journey. That's both the mystery and the extraordinary joy of life, I think.
And what makes it interesting.
That's what makes it interesting.
There is also this, which we will talk about another time too, but just give me a quick insight into it. You started this life as an actor.
Not entirely. I mean, yes. When I was acting, what happened was I maintain that what I do now is exactly what I did on the gas station and farm. I used to get kids together. I used to have an idea. I mean, my father was a photographer in the Vietnam War. I learned photography at an early age. I made films. I did little plays. I did magic shows. Sometimes I was in them. Sometimes I wasn't. And then I had a theatre company and made documentaries, and even before, while I was at high school. Then what happened was I acted, I made films, I directed things, I wrote stuff, and I financed my first theatre company by acting on a television series. Yeah. And I made films. I made my first movie ever made with Judy Davis, who was a remarkable Australian actress. Yeah. So to me, acting, it's like Orson Welles. You know, like, do you think of Orson as an actor or a director? He's really a storyteller. Right. You know, he did operas, he was able, I don't compare myself to Orson, he's a master, but you know, I just work in the currency of story. Yeah. Should I be in something or not depends on what's
in a different way. It's Woody Allen.
Indeed, and I think if you look at Orson and Woody and folk like that, you know, they themselves, they can't extract themselves from the act of storytelling themselves. And I've never been able to do that because I do actually use the act of storytelling to understand my own journey. It's not, I mean, there are many, I don't go like, gee, you know, wouldn't it be great to do that project because I'm going to be successful and make money. I go, I need to explore this theme in my life, the transition from youthful idealism to adulthood. You know, I want to, and so we want to live in New York City, which is 90% of the reason we did La Bohème on Broadway. You know. Yeah,
let me close on that. It was after 9/11. You were living downtown, and it gave you a sense of.
What happened, Charlie, was Moulin Rouge. To go out there and fight for Moulin Rouge, as there were many lovers and haters of it, was a world tour. I was in India blessed by an elephant and, you know, doing crazy things around the world to open the door for it. It took so long. We became so exhausted by it. We were going to give up on the idea of doing La Bohème, and we had begun the process of pulling out of it. And then one has to be very sensitive about the misuse of 9/11, but everyone has their 9/11 story. And I was in Tokyo, 9/11 happened, 2 weeks later we were in New York, and we'd come to make a decision. Would we do it or not? And there's a lot of talk of don't go. You know what it was like the week after. It was like New York City, there weren't a lot of folk around. Not everyone was racing to go there. We went, we went down to the site, and it was coming back from the site with CM that I said, you know, if ever there was a time to be doing in this city now a beautiful story about the beautiful side of humanity through beautiful music, this is the moment. And we, that day, met with the wonderful producers we've been working with here on Broadway, and we committed to it 100%.
Said another way, time not to retreat, but to go forward.
This is, I think, the great gift that being involved in storytelling gives you. It gives you something to face the day with, you know.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful to talk.
Thanks. La Bohème is at the Broadway Theatre. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.